Right, we can talk now. Tell me what your life has been like since you were 90.
What's my life been like since I was 90? Well, I mean, it was very much the same as it was when I was 89, or it was when I left work, I suppose, and I worked quite late. In fact, I taught most of my life in schools, most of my working life, and what was I going to say? Then when I retired, which I did, I think late I should have retired at 60, but in fact I went on working till I was about 65, I think. And I was working at London Zoo at one time, and at another time I was working at
Like Kew Gardens, do you mean?
Kew Gardens, that's right, yes.
And which was the best place to work?
Which was a nice place.
Yeah.
Well, I liked both of them, really. The good thing about the one when I was working at the zoo was that I was actually paid for it.
Oh, yes.
Whereas when I was working at Kew Gardens, I did it out of the goodness of my heart. They said they would pay me travelling money, but as I was sort of within walking distance, it didn't seem worth claiming it. So
I see.
I never did.
And what did you think of teaching?
I think at first it was hard. I think you have to learn how to teach, really.
Yeah.
But after a bit, I really enjoyed it. And as I say, I went on after I could have retired.
Mm-hmm. And what were the nice things? What were the good things about it?
Sorry?
What were the good things about teaching?
Well, holidays for one thing. No other job, or not many other jobs, give you such long holidays. But also, I think I was good at it. But perhaps I'm just praising myself, I don't know, but I felt as though I was good at it anyway, and I think actually I was. And so I really enjoyed it most of the time. I mean, kids could be a nuisance, but I've learnt over the years how to control them. And at the end, I was teaching at St. Paul's Girls' School, and it was fine. I was doing well.
Mm-hmm. And do you
best girls' school in London.
I see. And were the children nice? Do you remember the children, or some of them?
Yes, I mean, I remember them in bulk, but actually, when it comes down to names, no, yeah. I don't, because I have, nowadays, in my 90s, I have this fan who I taught, and she got in touch with me somehow that she found out my number when I was staying with my daughter Claire, and she's been a faithful correspondent ever since. In fact, I can't shed her. Sometimes I would rather like to, but it's nice in a way to have somebody who remember. The trouble is that, the bad thing is that I can't actually remember her as a child at all. However, there we are, and she still keeps in touch even after all these years.
That's rather nice. And
What else do you want me to say?
well, I'd like to hear what you feel about getting older, and is that horrible, or have you enjoyed it, or what?
Well, I don't think it was. I think recently I've become so disabled almost, and that I have to walk about with a stick, and I can't go very fast at all. And I would gladly not have that, but that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. And so is it better or worse than the rest of your life, do you think?
I don't think it's better. It seems very much the same, but perhaps it's slightly worse in that I'm much more disabled.
Yeah.
I have to walk with a stick, and tiresome, yes.
So,
anything else?
Well, lots more things you could talk about. Oh, you wrote a book once about whales. Tell us about that.
That's right, I did, yes. Whales and dolphins. It's largely because I had read Moby Dick, which is a wonderful book about whales. Moby Dick being a large white whale. And so I enjoyed writing that. I also wrote a sort of a book which was full of illustrations of plants, and you just had to write a little bit about each one. And I did that. Didn't enjoy that so much. I much preferred writing about the whales.
So that was good. And would you give advice to people who are getting towards 90? What would you say to me? Because I'm nearly 90, but I'm 6 years behind you.
Advice, you mean?
Yes, give me some useful advice.
Well, try and keep on your 2 feet is the best advice, I think. You know,
yeah,
it's balance that goes. And if you can manage not to walk with a stick, you're much better. Well, you don't walk with a stick, do you? I don't think.
Not at the moment, no. And what about
the question of balance?
What about your sort of mental attitude, your attitude to life?
Oh.
What do you think about it?
About my mental attitude? Or...
Well, what do you think people should have as they get older?
Well, I think you just have to accept what comes, don't you? And I think actually I'm fairly good at doing that. But, you know, what else can you do, basically?
You can't do much, but...
I mean, I would quite like to write another book, but I don't think I ever will.
Well, what would you like to write about? What would you write about?
Oh, I see. I don't know. Some sort of animals, I suppose, or plants or something. That being what I know about. Yes.
So what sort of animals? What would you write about? What would you say?
About animals? Well, it depends what animals I'm writing about.
Well, you've got to decide on an animal.
I wouldn't be terribly interested to write about cats or dogs, I don't think, or any of the animals that are, what's the word I want? I can't think.
Domesticated is the word you want, isn't it?
What?
Domesticated. Domestic.
Domesticated, that's the word I want, yes. And not those, but wild animals are interesting, I think.
And
maybe I should have written another book or done some research about it. I haven't, I'm afraid.
So what is interesting about animals, do you find?
What, sorry?
What do you find is interesting about animals?
Well, I think they're fascinating. They're all so different, aren't they?
Yeah,
And it's sort of, we're an animal as well, aren't we? And
yeah,
that is even more interesting in a way. When you think about early man and his development, I think it's rather amazing that we've done it, and now we've absolutely taken over the world, haven't we?
yes. And
Whereas whales are still happily swimming about in the sea, at least happily now, because they're not persecuted in any way. They're not hunted. They're can't think of the right word. They're protected, so to speak. So you can't just go out and shoot a whale or a dolphin or whatever, or anything if you felt like it. Not that I do.
I see. And are you frightened of death or not?
No, not really. I know it's coming. We all know it's coming, but I'm not frightened of it, not at the moment. Perhaps if I get really ill, I will be frightened. I don't know. But I don't know.
No, well,
It's rather sad when your children die before you do, which is what happened to me with my daughter,
yeah,
Annabella.
that is sad,
That
isn't
was
it?
very sad. Hated that.
Yeah, poor.
But it's all right. I'm not going to cry.
Well, that's all right. You can cry if you want to.
But it was sad.
Yeah. But yes, so what are the things you enjoy nowadays? What do you enjoy most?
Well, I enjoy most things, really. I love being driven about round the woods and the fields round here. I like being driven about anyway, actually. I rather regret that I've given up driving myself. I think perhaps I wouldn't be very good at it. I think I wouldn't be able to react quickly enough, probably. So it's probably as well that I'm not driving anymore.
Mm-hmm. But you like being driven?
Sorry?
You like being driven?
Yes, I do. Yes, I
And
like it when you drive me around the
okay. That's good.
woods here.
Well, the woods here are beautiful at the moment, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're lovely in the autumn. Yes.
And would you give any advice to people who are getting towards 90? What would you say? Advice, yes. Give me some advice. I'm nearly 90. I'm not far behind you, really.
Your balance, I think, is the thing.
Balance.
Perhaps by doing exercises, which you do, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Maybe that helps. I don't know.
I think it probably does. It's helped me a lot because I'm still quite fit for my age. And you are really...
Otherwise, you know, you're such a damn nuisance to everybody, really. You have to have everything done for you, more or less.
Yes. So it's time we ended, really, because we can't think. What else should we say, Jeannie? What would you like to come and ask Jacky something?
I don't know, really.
I'll tell you one
Did you
thing
have a
which
happy
is quite
childhood?
interesting.
Oh,
I
Jeannie.
remember my childhood very clearly.
Yes.
And all about Abbots Langley.
Oh, tell it. Yes, you said you would talk about Abbots Langley. We lived down a road where most of our relations lived, didn't we?
Yes, I did. But that was the second place I lived in. The first place was up opposite the church.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was called Church Gate, I seem to remember. And I just stayed there for a short while. In fact, my earliest memory comes from that, and that was because I'd been out in the garden and it was winter time, and I'd been dabbling my hands in the water butt and went into the house, and the somebody, I don't remember, I think it was probably the sort of helper, the maid, put my hands under the hot tap, and it was absolutely agonizing. And that is my earliest memory, because it hurt so much. But I have happy memories about Abbots Langley and all the relations that I had there, because I had great aunts and great uncles all up the road, the
Yes.
same road that ran
have the
down
same
from Abbots
surname?
Langley
Did they have the
and
same
main
surname?
village, right down to King's Langley, where my father used to walk down there and get the train into London where he worked. Yes. So
I see. And what other Abbots Langley memories? My memories are a horrible dog that lived next door is one of the things I remember. What do you remember?
that.
Green
No.
Gates.
Green Gates.
Yeah.
Tell us about Green Gates, where we both lived for
Yeah.
when I was about 5 and
Yes.
you were about 8 or
Yes.
9.
I
Or,
do remember vaguely now you say, I think. Yes.
do you? Yes.
Yes.
It barked all the time.
That's
I was
right.
really
It
frightened
was a
of
horrible
it.
little dog. You're
I
quite
don't-
right.
So what other memories
But I
do you?
don't think it would have done you any harm.
No, I don't think so, but it frightened me.
What else?
I remember Dad used to bring back humbugs. Do you remember that?
Humbugs.
Yes, big
Yes.
bags of
Oh,
humbugs.
did you? No, I've forgotten that. Yes.
What do you remember?
Well, yes. What else do I remember
Apple trees.
about my hands? Yes.
Did you
And
have apple trees?
Then we moved from there down to a Abbots Road, which ran all the way down from the village.
Yeah.
And I think I had a very happy childhood. Actually, I enjoyed it there, and then I went to school at my auntie's. My mother's sister had lost a husband. He was killed somewhere, so she had to earn her living because she had children, and so the only thing that she could do was to teach, and so she started a school in her parents' house, had one big front room, and that was used as a school. And I used to walk up to it every morning, every school morning, and later on with my sister Sally, and she taught me a lot, really. And it wasn't till I went to secondary school that I came upon a school that was horrible, and that was St Albans High School. Now it's probably nowadays probably a perfectly good school, but in those days it was run by the ex-games mistress, who had the head was rather feeble woman, and this awful Miss Lee, the ex-games mistress, ran everything. She was the boss. Yeah. And I all remember actually. I'd been sent out of my place the room I was in, not because I'd behaved badly, but to collect some crayons or something. It was an art room. And as I went out, I came upon Miss Archibald, the head mistress of St. Paul's, not St. Paul's,
St. Albans.
Sorry.
Yeah, the headmistress of St. Albans, yes.
And she put a hand on my head and said, "This is little Anthea Martin. She is just going to a music lesson." I had the sense not to say, wasn't very old, but I had the sense not to say, "Oh, no, I'm not." But it just shows what the school was like, I think.
Yes. Oh,
So
well,
I stayed there until I was, I don't know, about 14, I suppose, I don't know. And it got worse and worse with awful Miss Lee. And in the end, my aunt had remarried, and she'd married somebody who was an educationalist. And he said, "Take her away from that. It sounds a dreadful school. Take her away from it." So they did. And I went up to Liverpool, which is where my mother and father were living at that time. He'd been evacuated up there because of the war. And what was I saying? So I went up to Liverpool. And went to school in Liverpool, and it was an ever so much better school than St. Albans High School, which is probably nowadays a perfectly good school, but wasn't then. And so I did my O-levels, I did my A-levels, and I went to university. And that was lovely. I liked going to university. You suddenly feel sort of set free.
Yes,
you're not a child,
up.
you're not being pushed about, made to go here and there. You can do what the hell you like, really. So I think I wasted quite a lot of time as a student, I'm afraid. But I did get a BSc in the end. And
in what?
I became a teacher.
What was the BSc in? Was it in biology?
Biology, yes. Botany and zoology, both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
which is what interested me, it was fine.
Yeah. Tell us about how you helped Hitler.
Oh, yes, that's right. Oh, yes. When I was at the boarding school still at St. Albans, it was wartime and the food was pretty awful. But I suppose not so bad. We were sort of used to it. And one day we were given one day, several days actually, we were given a bowl of what was called chocolate rice. And what it was plain boiled rice, boiled in water and cold and mixed with a sprinkling of sugar and a sprinkling of chocolate powder, cocoa. And it was pretty horrible. And the third time or the fourth time or whatever it was that it came up, I said to the people on the table I was with, "I'm not going to eat this." And they suddenly joined in and said, "No, we're not either." So we were reported to Miss Lee, who summoned my mother because it was so awful, this, and said, I was helping Hitler, which is a bit ridiculous. Anyways, that's how I helped Hitler, and he never knew I helped him. Oh dear.
Do you remember Coral? She was
Sorry?
my Coral. Do you
What?
remember Coral?
Oh yes, yes, yes. When I was still young and living in Abbots Langley, we had a sort of home help who was called Coral Slade, and she was part of the Slade family. Mrs. Slade cooked for my grandmother and aunt, who lived in the same place. And what was I talking about? Coral Slade, oh yes. And she was highly intelligent, but she suffered in those days from being poor and going to the local state school, which finished at 14. And if you had enough money to send the child on to the next town, you could go on being at school there, but they couldn't afford even that, poor dears. And Coral was lovely, and I actually went to her funeral when she died, which was many, many years later. Do you remember Coral Slade?
I remember Coral very, very well.
Yes.
I thought she was wonderful. Yes. But she was a girl guide, wasn't she? She was a very enthusiastic girl guide.
Yeah, that's right, she was. Yes.
And she'd been to some get together of guides somewhere in some foreign part, I think. And
I think she did really well in the end. I'm not sure what she did exactly.
Well, what she did was she went on to become matron of a boarding school, I think.
Did she? Yes.
And funnily enough, the flutist James Galway sent his son to this school, and she was very sort of attached to this son, and this son was very fond of her as well. And I was, yes, and she was a lovely girl, I thought, a lovely woman.
Yes, she was great. And she was really intelligent and held back in those days by poverty.
Yeah, I suppose she was. Her dad was a fireman, I remember, because I thought this was very important.
I thought he did our garden.
Yes, he was lots of gardening, but he was also a fireman. And this used to seem very exciting to me, and I thought, how wonderful. I remember their house as well.
Oh, that's right, and she had a sister who was called, I've forgotten what now.
Oh, she had several sisters, and one of them was called Connie. Who used to work for...
Can I tell you about her?
Yes.
She was called Dora, wasn't she?
Oh, there was one called Dora, sister. Yes.
And she, for her 21st birthday, had all her teeth taken out, because I suppose dentistry was so awful in those days. No injections, nothing. If you were you had really bad teeth, you had you had gas, and you were knocked out completely. Otherwise, if it was fairly minor, you just grinned and bore it, and it was jolly painful, I can tell you.
Yes.
So thank God, at least dentistry has got better since my youth.
Yes, it has. I often think, they are doing things to your teeth and you can't feel anything at all. It's as if they are doing something to your motor car, only you're sort of attached to it. That's the only difference. Anyway.
No, I remember them saying, I'm not hurting you, and they were hurting like mad. So at least dentistry's got a lot better.
Yes,
Mm.
perhaps we'll get better
Can
still.
I introduce my thoughts on it?
What?
My mum told me that when she was a little girl, the dentistry had they didn't put you out.
Yeah.
And if they and doctors as well, they did, if they had to do something with your leg, they didn't put you out. They just did it. And so they outside the dentists there was a bar, a white striped with red, a red and white striped bar sticking out,
Yeah.
to show that it was a dentist. And they used to get the band to come, and the band played very loudly outside the dentist's when they were cutting somebody's leg off and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And when they were pulling your teeth out,
I
the
can't
band
really
would
hear
play-
you, I'm
you-
afraid, from here.
Nick, tell her.
Something
The band
about
would play very
dentists, yes.
loudly.
Jean is saying that they had a band outside a dentist playing very loudly. I remember Aunt Yvonne said, doctors are just jumped up barbers.
Well, I think they were almost the
That was a
same.
bit naughty.
It was the same thing.
It was only to me, it wasn't to them. Do you remember old Dr. What was he called? The doctor at Abbots Langley. Can you remember?
Sorry?
Can you remember the name of the doctor at Abbots Langley?
At Abbots Langley.
And he used to
No, I
have this
can't remember
watch,
at
which was
all.
very loud.
Was he?
Yes, and if you said, I can't, my hearing isn't, it seems to have affected my hearing, he would hold this huge watch up to you, and you could hear it from about 10, 20 or 50 yards. So it wasn't much good. I could always hear it when he held it up, even though I couldn't hear anything else.
I don't remember the doctors at Abbots Langley. Perhaps I was a healthy child.
Perhaps you were, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I've forgotten his name. It just crossed my mind then. But at any rate, so that was time.
Yes.
And
Awful.
when you were, those years when you were at school, did you come with for holidays with us? You must have done. We moved all around with
Yes.
Southport and Freshfield.
Well, while we were all still living in Abbots Langley, yes.
No, while you were living at boarding school.
Oh, at boarding school. Yes, I used to come home for holidays. And I always remember one time being ill. I caught scarlet fever or something, and I must have caught it from one of the day girls because nobody else at the boarding school had it. And they shoved me in one of the maids' rooms, tiny little place, and didn't come near me all the time. And luckily for me, one of the maids took pity on me and brought me some magazines to read.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, I was just left there with nothing to do.
Oh, how awful.
Till I managed to get better. Yeah, which I did, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty awful school in every way, I think.
And so what have been the great joys of your life?
Sorry?
What have been the great joys in your life? The great pleasures, the best pleasures, the best joys.
What gave me most pleasure?
Yes.
Yes. As a child, I can't remember. Oh, reading. I do remember going to church as a very small child and wishing that I could sing the hymns because I didn't know them off by heart, obviously. And I thought I must learn to read. And so I did. I don't know if I was young, but I did learn somehow or other. And I think before I went to school, even went to Aunt Yvonne's school,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I learnt to read.
My brother George learned to read when he was 4, before he went to school.
Sorry,
He
can't
taught
hear you.
himself.
Oh, Jean is saying that her brother George learnt to read when he was 4.
Really?
And he
That's
taught
jolly good.
himself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
He taught himself.
I don't know how old I was, but I do remember being able to, and the sort of the freedom it gave one. And one didn't have to wait for somebody to come and read to you. You could actually just take a book and read it yourself. I mean, obviously, I've been sort of pampered before, I think, because I could read, yes.
Oh, that's good. So what else should we talk about? Ah,
I wasn't so deaf in those days.
no.
In fact, I wasn't deaf at all. Dear, oh dear.
So it was a happy childhood, was it?
Oh dear.
Were you happy as a child?
Yes, I think so. Yes, don't remember being. No, I wasn't very happy at St
school.
Albans High School. No, I
that was a
wasn't happy
shame,
there.
wasn't it?
But as I say, they took me away from it,
Yeah.
and that was great. And went up to Liverpool, which is where my mother and father had been. Well, my father had been sent there during the war. It was a peculiar place to take them, wasn't it, really? Because
Yes, because that was bombed.
Liverpool was bombed.
But anyway.
I think it was the docks that were bombed mostly,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So
I was
perhaps
bombed.
anyway, we survived that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was good.
I do
Okay.
remember as a child wishing in the church, because we went very much to the church every Sunday, and wishing that I could read the hymns.
And now you
therefore
can.
sing them, yes. So that was a...
Thing. Okay, let's stop.
I don't know what age I was when I learned, but I did learn and it was good.